So the topic for our mutual encouragement is David and Bathsheba.
今晚同大家一齊彼此分享嘅題目就係大衛與別是巴。
So I'm sure it's a story that we're all quite familiar with.
我相信呢個嘅故事，我哋大家都非常之熟悉。
And we know from the story that David, he was overcome with temptation.
喺呢個嘅事件裏邊，我哋知道大衛係被呢個引誘去勝過。
And he committed two great sins.
咁因為呢個嘅試探，佢就犯下兩個嘅大罪。
One was adultery.
一個就係奸淫。
And the other one was murder.
另外一個就係殺人。
So he saw Bathsheba from the rooftop.
咁大衛就喺皇宮嘅屋頂上邊就見到別是巴。
And he inquired.
咁跟住佢就去查問呢個婦人。
And she found that this was the wife of Uriah.
咁佢就得知到別是巴就係烏利亞嘅妻子。
And he knew Uriah quite well.
相信大衛係非常之熟悉烏利亞呢個人㗎。
Because he was named as one of the mighty men of David.
因為烏利亞係大衛其中一個壯士之一。
Nevertheless, he still took Bathsheba and laid with her.
無論如何，咁大衛依然就將別是巴接過嚟，就同佢同寢。
And she conceived.
咁之後別是巴就懷孕。
So to cover up the sin of adultery.
咁為咗佢要遮掩佢自己奸淫呢個嘅罪名。
We know he eventually instructed Joab.
咁之後佢就吩咐約押。
To set Uriah at the front of the hottest battle.
就差派烏利亞去到戰場上嘅最極險之處。
So even though he never killed him with his bare hands.
雖然大衛冇親自用佢自己嘅雙手去殺烏利亞。
It was under his instruction.
但係就係大衛嘅指示。
So the consequence of one temptation gave away to two sins and two deaths.
所以一個嘅試探帶嚟咗兩個嘅罪惡同埋兩個人命嘅死亡。
So the death of Uriah.
其中一個就係烏利亞嘅死亡。
And the death of the son that was conceived between David and Bathsheba.
另外一個嘅就係別是巴為大衛所生下嘅兒子嘅死亡。
Yeah, so it's a tragic story.
係一個好悲慘嘅故事。
But we can ask the question.
但係我哋可以問一個問題。
Why was David overcome with temptation in the first place?
點解大衛會被呢個嘅引誘去勝過佢自己呢？
So when we look at the roots or the causes of why David was tempted in the first place.
如果我哋首先睇下點解大衛係被引誘呢個根源嘅話，
we can learn, about how we can keep our own guard up in this world where there's a lot of different types of temptations.
咁我哋從中就可以學習得到，我哋生活喺呢個充滿邪惡嘅世界裏邊，充滿引誘嘅世界裏邊，我哋點樣可以防備呢啲嘅引誘？
So we can first look at 2 Samuel.
我哋首先睇下撒母耳記下。
2 Samuel chapter 11.
撒母耳記下嘅第11章。
And we can read verse 1.
第一節。
So in the name of the Lord Jesus we read. It happened in the spring of the year, at the time when kings go out to battle, that David sent Joab and his servants with him, and all Israel, and they destroyed the people of Ammon and besieged Rabbah, but David remained at Jerusalem.
撒母耳記下11章嘅第一節，奉主耶穌聖名讀經。過了1年，到列王出戰的時候，大衛又差派約押率領臣僕和以色列眾人出戰，他們就打敗亞門人，圍攻拉巴。大衛仍住在耶路撒冷。
So we read here that it was the season.
咁我哋睇到當時呢一刻。
It was a season or the time for the kings to go out to battle.
當時呢一刻就係列王出戰嘅時候。
But David, he chose to stay in Jerusalem.
但係大衛就選擇留住喺耶路撒冷裏面。
So as a king.
作為一個王。
Yeah, this was his responsibility.
出戰係佢嘅職責。
He was supposed to be in battle.
佢係應該喺戰場上作戰㗎。
But instead, we find him sitting at home.
但係反而嘅大衛就留守住喺耶路撒冷屋企裏邊。
So at the time.
咁當時。
In the moments leading up to the temptation.
當時大衛被引誘嘅呢一刻。
He should have been in battle.
佢應該係喺戰場上。
But he wasn't.
但係佢冇上陣。
And that was an opportunity for Satan to tempt him.
呢個就導致到佢被撒旦引誘嘅原因。
So when we think about our own lives,
咁如果我哋思想下我哋嘅人生裏面，
we've all got different kinds of responsibilities.
我哋大家都有各種唔同嘅責任。
To name a few,
如果我哋可以數一數下嘅話，
our responsibility could be studying.
我哋嘅責任可以係讀書。
We could be working.
我哋可以返工。
We could be looking after our parents or our children.
我哋可以照顧我哋嘅父母或者我哋嘅兒女。
So there are, times assigned for us to fulfill our responsibilities.
所以有啲時候我哋係要去完成我哋嘅責任嘅。
But when we leave our responsibility,
但係當我哋選擇去放下我哋嘅責任嘅時候，
or we choose not to fulfill our responsibilities,
又或者我哋選擇去唔將我哋嘅責任去完成嘅話，
then there's a chance that we are open to temptation.
咁有機會我哋就公然被引誘。
Yeah, we're supposed to be somewhere.
我哋應該係喺某處嘅地方。
We're supposed to be fulfilling our responsibility.
又或者我哋應該係要去完成我哋嘅責任。
But because we're not,
但係因為我哋冇咁樣做，
there's an opportunity for Satan to exploit.
就會留下撒旦去利用呢啲嘅機會去引誘我哋。
So for example,
例如嚟講，
we're supposed to be working from home.
我哋或者喺家中嗰度工作。
But we go and choose to do something else, like watching TV or browsing the web.
但係或者我哋反而選擇去睇電視或者上網。
Or we're supposed to be studying.
或者我哋應該係去溫書嘅。
Or having dinner with our parents.
或者同我哋嘅父母用餐。
Instead, we might be up to no good with some friends.
反而嘅，我哋就利用呢啲時間去同一啲損友去做一啲唔適當嘅事情。
And there's a verse in Jude, which talks about some angels, who left their responsibility.
喺猶大書裏邊有一個章節講到，有啲嘅天使佢哋離開佢哋嘅職分。
And God reserved them in everlasting chains under darkness.
咁神就用鎖鏈將佢哋永遠咁拘留喺黑暗裏面。
We can read Jude 6.
我哋可以翻開猶大書嘅第六節。
Jude 6.
猶大書6節。
And the angels who did not keep their proper domain, but left their own abode, he has reserved in everlasting chains under darkness for the judgment of the great day.
第6節，又有不守本位、離開自己住處的天使，主用鎖鏈把他們永遠拘留在黑暗裏，等候大日子的審判。
So the angels here, they can refer to workers of God.
呢度所講嘅天使可以預表着神嘅工人。
And God, he assigns each worker a responsibility.
神已經安排咗好多嘅責任俾每一位嘅工人。
And that responsibility is your abode.
呢啲嘅責任就係你嘅職責。
And usually, there's a limit to what you're responsible for.
通常你嘅責任都係有佢嘅界限。
And this is the domain that you work within.
呢個就係你嘅工作嘅範圍。
And we find that they did not keep, and they did not, and they left their responsibility.
但係呢度所講嘅天使，佢哋就冇守佢哋嘅本位，甚至離開咗佢哋自己嘅住處。
Yeah, so for the fallen workers here, they were not satisfied with the responsibility that God had assigned.
咁呢度所講嘅墮落嘅工人，佢哋係唔滿意神為佢哋安排嘅職責。
And for David, it wasn't as though he wasn't satisfied with the responsibility that he had.
咁對大衛嚟講，佢唔係話對佢嘅職責唔滿意。
But he was not satisfied in other areas of his life.
但係喺佢嘅生命裏邊，佢係有其他嘅事情上，佢係唔滿意㗎。
So we can look back at 2 Samuel chapter 11.
我哋可以睇返撒母耳記下嘅第11章。
We can read verse 2.
我哋睇第2節。
Then it happened one evening that David arose from his bed and walked on the roof of the king's house. And from the roof he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful to behold.
第2節，一日太陽平西，大衛從床上起來，在王宮的平頂上遊行，看見一個婦人沐浴，容貌甚美。
So the walking mentioned here can be sometimes translated as strolling.
呢度所講嘅遊行，有時翻出嚟會係漫步。
So I think in the Chinese it's interpreted quite well. It's like a leisurely walk.
中文嘅版本翻出嚟係遊行。
Yeah, so it's a type of walking that you would probably do with your wife.
呢種嘅遊行就好似你同你太太去散步一樣。
Or your other half, sorry.
或者你同你另一半去散步一樣。
So yeah, during the lockdown, I think when places were shut.
咁喺封鎖嘅期間，好多地方都關閉。
That's what me and my wife did. We would often after dinner take this leisurely walk.
我同我太太當時都好常飯後之後，我哋就去散步。
We would just stroll around the area that we lived in.
我哋就會喺我哋所住嘅屋苑裏邊漫步。
So when we come back to the story of David and Bathsheba.
咁我哋講返大衛同埋拔示巴。
We know that the Bible names 8 wives of David.
咁我哋亦都知道聖經裏邊提及到大衛嘅8個嘅妻子嘅名字。
Yeah, but it also tells us that he took more wives for himself.
聖經亦都講大衛立下好多其他嘅妃嬪。
And I know at the time, that was kind of like a thing that you can do, take more wives.
咁喺古時代，娶妻納妾係一個好平常嘅事。
But I think it suggests that he wasn't very satisfied with his marriages.
但係亦都話到俾我哋聽，其實大衛對佢嘅婚姻係唔係非常之滿意㗎。
So if we look at 2 Samuel chapter 6.
我哋睇下撒母耳記下嘅第6章。
It records an incident with one of his wives.
呢度係記載大衛同佢其中一個嘅妻子嘅事蹟。
So in chapter 6, David had brought back the Ark of God to the city of David.
咁喺第6章裏邊，大衛就將神嘅約櫃帶回大衛城。
And he was very glad and he was very joyful.
當時大衛係歡喜快樂㗎。
And he was dancing.
佢亦都響度鼓舞。
But his wife, Michal.
但係當時佢個妻子米甲。
Saul's daughter.
就係掃羅嘅女兒。
She saw through the window David's dancing, and it says in verse 16 that she despised him.
咁喺第16節話，米甲係從窗戶裏觀看，就見到大衛，就心裏就輕視佢。
Yeah, and in verse 20, it says that she criticized David for dancing in a shameless manner.
咁喺第20節亦都提及到米甲就形容大衛如一個輕賤嘅人，無恥露體一樣。
Yeah, and in the end, we see that Michal and David, they had no children.
到最後，我哋知道米甲同埋大衛係冇生兒養女。
Verse 23, it says, therefore, Michal, the daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death.
第23節話，掃羅的女兒米甲，直到死日沒有生養兒女。
So his marriage with Michal in particular was not good.
所以大衛同埋米甲呢段婚姻唔可以話係一段好嘅婚姻。
He wasn't very satisfied.
相信大衛係唔係好滿意㗎。
If he was satisfied with any of his wives. 如
果大衛係對佢眾妻子係滿意嘅話
they would have accompanied him on the rooftop for the walk.
咁當大衛喺皇宮嘅頂處嘅時候，散步嘅時候，相信佢啲妻子應該係陪同大衛一齊。
Yeah, the wife would have been by his side on this leisurely walk.
咁嗰一晚，當大衛喺度遊行嘅時候，相信佢啲妻子應該係陪同佢一齊。
And if his wife caught him looking at Bathsheba.
又或者如果當時其中一個妻子係睇到大衛睇到別是巴嘅話
，and then I'm sure his wife, would have probably hit him and says, "Oh mom, don't look at it."
又或咁樣，佢嘅妻子或者會碰一碰大衛，叫佢唔好再睇。
Yeah, so the temptation, it would have dissolved quite quickly.
如果係咁樣嘅話，咁大衛呢個嘅引誘就可以好快咁平息。
So for us today, if we're not satisfied in any aspect of our lives.
所以對我哋今日嚟講，如果我哋生命上我哋有邊一方面我哋係唔滿意嘅話
，so not just in our marriages，
唔單止係講我哋嘅婚姻上，
then we can be open to temptation.
我哋可以公開自己被試探。
So for example,
例如嚟講，
if we're not satisfied with the order of the church,
如果我哋對教會嘅指示係唔滿意嘅話，
or the responsibility that God has assigned us,
或者神已經差派俾我哋嘅工作，我哋係唔滿意嘅話，
then Satan, he can exploit our pride,
咁撒旦就有機會去利用我哋嘅虛榮心，
and can tempt us with false teachings.
亦都可以用假嘅道理去引誘我哋。
And these false teachings, it provides a platform to satisfy our pride.
咁呢啲假嘅道理就會形成一個渠道去填滿我哋嘅虛榮心。
Yeah. So instead, I think we need to fill our hearts with the love of God.
反而嘅，我哋需要就用神嘅愛去填滿我哋嘅心。
So the more you draw closer to God,
我哋越係親近神嘅話，
the more love you will experience.
我哋就會越感染到神嘅愛。
And then, when your hearts are overflown with, the love of God,
如果我哋個心能夠被神嘅愛填滿嘅話，
then there is no wiggle room for anything else.
咁我哋嘅心裏邊再冇其他嘅空隙去再其他嘅事情。
We're completely satisfied with God.
我哋係可以對神完完全全咁樣滿足。
We're satisfied with His love and everything that He has given us.
我哋對神嘅愛，神所供給我哋所有嘅事情都係滿足。
So we can look at a verse in Proverbs.
我哋可以睇下箴言，
Proverbs chapter 4.
箴言嘅第4章，
Proverbs chapter 4 verse 23.
第23節。
So keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it spring the issues of life.
4章23節，你要保守你心，勝過保守一切，因為一生的果效是由心發出。
So Satan, he will exploit any space in our heart that we give him.
撒旦係一定會利用我哋心裏每一個嘅空隙㗎。
And the book of James, teaches us that that temptations come from the desires of the heart.
咁雅各書亦都教導我哋呢啲嘅試探係嚟自我哋嘅私慾。
So when it says here, out of our heart spring the issues of the things we face in life.
喺箴言裏邊就講，我哋一生嘅果效都係由心發出。
It's important, that we keep our heart by filling it with the love of God.
所以我哋需要嘅就係保守我哋嘅心，就讓神嘅愛去填滿。
Yeah, we have to learn, or we have to pray, to be satisfied with what God has given us.
我哋要去學習同埋要禱告，讓神去讓我哋能夠滿足。
Yeah, and then obviously from there, we can keep our guard up against temptation.
咁樣我哋就能夠防備一切嘅誘惑。
So we can look back at 2 Samuel chapter 11.
我哋可以再睇返撒母耳記下嘅第11章，
And we can read verse 2 again.
再讀第2節。
Then it happened one evening that David arose from his bed and walked on the roof of the king's house. And from the roof he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful to behold.
第2節，一日太陽平西，大衛從床上起來，在王宮的平頂上遊行，看見一個婦人沐浴，容貌甚美。
So the third teaching we can learn is to lead a life of discipline.
咁第3個嘅教訓，我哋可以學習嘅就係我哋要有一個有紀律嘅人生。
So we read here that David, he arose from his bed in the evening.
喺呢度我哋讀到大衛就喺太陽平西嘅時候起床。
So we might think, fair enough, he chose to leave or delay his responsibility.
或者我哋會理解大衛放下佢嘅責任，或者推遲佢嘅職責。
Yeah, he obviously didn't go to battle.
佢冇出陣，佢冇上戰場。
Maybe he had other duties to fulfill as a king.
或者作為一個王，佢有其他嘅事務要管理。
Yeah, responsibilities that he needs to do during the day.
或者喺日間佢有好多嘅事務。
But this obviously doesn't appear so because we see that he arose in the evening.
但係呢度所講嘅大衛係喺太陽平西，即係夜晚黑佢先起床。
So it suggests that he slept late and he woke up late.
呢個可以俾我哋知道，大衛其實係好遲先睡覺，亦都好晏先起身。
He didn't seem to have a good routine.
睇起嚟佢冇一個好嘅習慣。
It doesn't seem that he was very disciplined.
睇起嚟佢係冇一個良好嘅紀律。
And we find that, with this lack of discipline in his life, he was open to temptation.
咁就係喺佢嘅生命裏冇一個良好嘅習慣，所以佢就公然被試探。
And sometimes, I think we lack discipline in our life too.
咁有時喺我哋嘅生命裏邊，我哋亦都缺乏一啲嘅紀律。
So for myself,
對我自己嚟講
I always say to my wife that I need to start sleeping earlier.
我會好常同我嘅太太講，我應該要早啲瞓。
Because I'm always tired.
因為我成日都感覺好疲倦。
And even though we may go to our bedroom early,
或者我哋會好早返入我哋嘅房間，
I'm still not sleeping.
但係我仍然唔係早睡。
Because I'm watching football highlights before bed.
或者我係臨瞓之前，我會睇一啲關於足球嘅事情。
Or I don't know, I'm reading the news or something.
或者有時我喺度讀一啲嘅新聞。
So the routine I have, isn't good.
所以我有嘅日常習慣唔係非常之好。
And I'm not very disciplined in sleeping at an earlier time.
如果講到要早睡，咁我亦都冇一個好好嘅紀律。
But we can think about our spiritual routine.
咁我哋就可以思想下我哋嘅屬靈上嘅習慣。
And our spiritual discipline.
又或者我哋屬靈方面嘅紀律。
We should be praying when we get up.
我哋應該每朝起身就禱告。
We should be praying before we sleep.
咁我哋夜晚臨瞓亦都要禱告。
We should be reading the words of life every day.
我哋應該每一日去讀生命之道。
We should be entering the one body, the church, to fellowship with our brethren.
我哋應該同齡弟兄姊妹一齊團契去進入呢個嘅一個身體裏面。
Yeah, and I think last Friday, we were reminded not to forget the basics.
咁上個星期五，我哋被提醒到，我哋唔可以忘記最基本嘅事情。
So some teachings, they appear to be repetitive.
有時有啲教訓聽起上嚟係重複再重複。
But they are very necessary for our faith to take root.
但係對我哋嘅信仰去扎根呢，其實呢啲嘅重複嘅教訓係非常之重要。
Yeah, for our faith to be rooted in the correct foundation.
如果我哋想我哋嘅信仰係扎得喺好嘅根基上面。
Yeah, so praying.
所以禱告。
Reading God's words.
讀神嘅話語。
And fellowshipping.
同埋團契。
They're basic aspects of our faith, but very fundamental.
呢啲通通都係我哋信仰上最基本嘅事情，但係對我哋嘅信仰亦都係非常之重要嘅。
So we can take praying as an example.
我哋可以攞禱告嚟做一個例子。
We all know that Jesus once said, "Watch and pray, lest you enter temptation."
我哋大家都清楚，主耶穌曾經講過，我哋要謹慎警醒禱告，免得我哋進入迷惑。
And he also said, "The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak."
主耶穌亦都講過，我哋心靈卻是願意，但係肉體係軟弱嘅。
So it's it is fundamental for us to establish a routine of prayer.
所以我哋要建立一個禱告嘅生活係非常之重要。
And also to be disciplined in keeping that routine.
我哋亦都要好有紀律咁樣去守住呢啲嘅習慣。
One of the reasons to pray is exactly what Jesus said, because our flesh is weak.
我哋要禱告，其中一個嘅原因就係就如耶穌所講，因為我哋心靈係軟弱。
And we can't enter temptation.
我哋係好容易進入呢個迷惑。
So through prayer, I think God can reveal our heart's desires.
所以藉着嘅禱告，神可以彰顯我哋心中嘅慾望出嚟。
He can give us the strength not to be drawn away by our desires.
神亦都會俾到我哋呢個力量，唔好被引誘帶走。
And he can also help us from being enticed by our desires.
亦都可以幫助我哋唔好隨着我哋嘅慾望而。
And I think he can really guard our hearts from temptation.
神係可以守住我哋嘅心，免得我哋被迷惑。
Through prayer.
藉着禱告。
So obviously, what Jesus said, the first part was watch.
所以主耶穌首先係講叫我哋要警醒。
So it was a while ago, when not long ago, anyways. We were reminded how we can be watchful in our prayers.
前一排我哋被提醒，我哋要喺禱告上要緊守警醒。
We can be watchful by being serious in our prayers.
我哋要緊守就係要喺禱告上認真。
So we can look at 1 Peter.
我哋睇下彼得前書。
1 Peter chapter 4.
彼得前書嘅第4章。
We can read verse 7.
第7節。
So that's 1 Peter chapter 4 verse 7.
彼得前書4章嘅第7節。
But the end of all things is at hand. Therefore be serious and watchful in your prayers.
4章7節，萬物的結局近了，所以你們要謹守自守，警醒禱告。
So if we are serious in prayer.
如果我哋喺禱告上，我哋係認真嘅話，
the spiritual power that is accompanied with prayer will be manifested.
咁禱告所帶嚟嘅屬靈嘅力量就能夠彰顯。
We will be able to see temptations.
我哋可以睇到呢啲嘅誘惑。
And we will be able to have the strength to flee from it.
我哋亦都有呢個力量去逃避呢啲一切嘅誘惑。
So to just check if our prayers are serious.
如果我哋想清楚知道自己對禱告係咪認真嘅話，
we can just ask ourselves a simple question.
我哋可以自問一個好簡單嘅問題。
Every time you pray, do you believe that God is searching your hearts?
每一次我哋禱告嘅時候，我哋係咪深信神係喺度監察緊我哋嘅內心呢？
Because if you do believe in this,
如果你係深信嘅話，
then even your thoughts, will be kept in check.
相信我哋嘅心思意念，我哋亦都會好小心。
We won't let our minds wander.
我哋唔會俾我哋腦海所想嘅去遊蕩。
And God, He will surely manifest His power in our life when we're spiritually disciplined.
如果我哋有屬靈嘅記錄嘅話，神必定會喺我哋嘅身上彰顯佢嘅大能。
Yeah. So, just look at Daniel.
我哋可以睇下但以理。
He was a man that led a disciplined life.
但以理係一個有紀律嘅人生嘅一個人。
He not only prayed 3 times a day.
佢唔單止一日禱告3次。
But he purposed in his heart not to defile himself.
佢亦都心裏邊係
purpose in his heart. He was determined.
佢係心裏邊下定決心，係唔會玷污自己。
And then obviously we find that he was faithful to the end.
咁佢亦都係忠心到做最終。
And he was never overcome by temptation.
佢亦都冇俾試煉去勝過佢自己。
So we can look back at 2 Samuel.
我哋睇返撒母耳記下。
And we can read verse 2 again.
再睇第2章。
So then it happened one evening that David arose from his bed and walked on the roof of the king's house. And from the roof he saw a woman bathing. And the woman was very beautiful to behold.
係11章第2節。一日太陽平西，大衛從床上起來，在王宮的平頂上遊行，看見一個婦人沐浴，容貌甚美。
So the next thing we see here, David's eyes were captured.
咁呢度我哋所讀到另外一樣嘅，大衛佢個眼就定睛看見一件事。
The woman was very beautiful to behold.
佢所睇到嘅就係呢個女人係容貌甚美。
So in Chinese, I think it just says she was very beautiful.
咁喺中文嘅譯本就話容貌甚美。
It doesn't have this English word behold.
冇英文呢句 behold 即係看下呢個字句喺度。
Yeah, so we can look at a couple of examples to try and illustrate it in Chinese. 咁
我哋可以睇下其他嘅例子去形容看下呢個嘅字眼。
Yeah, so we can look at Revelations.
我哋睇下啟示錄。
Revelations chapter 6.
啟示錄嘅第6章。
We can read verse 2.
第6章嘅第2節。
And I looked, and behold, a white horse. He sat on it, and had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he went out conquering and to conquer.
啟示錄6章2節，我就觀看，見一匹白馬，騎在馬上的拿着弓，並有冠冕賜給他，他便出來勝了又要勝。
So here in Revelations, I think it uses the word gunghong.
咁喺呢度中文版本就用到觀看。
And then if we look at another example in John,
我哋可以喺約翰福音睇另外一個嘅例子。
John chapter 1.
約翰福音嘅第1章。
We can read verse 36.
第1章第36節。
And looking at Jesus as he walked, he said, "Behold, the Lamb of God."
約翰福音
chapter
1
1,
章
verse
36節。
Yeah.
他看見耶穌行走，就說：看哪，這是神的羔羊。
So in this example, the Chinese is Hong La.
喺呢度中文版本就用到看哪呢個字眼。
So this word, in English, it's derived from the Greek word Edo.
咁看哪呢個英文字其實係從希臘文 Edo 呢個字翻出嚟㗎。
So it can be translated as being sure to see.
咁再翻出嚟嘅意思可以話係確實看見。
Yeah. So being sure of what we see requires us to look intently at something.
如果我哋要確實去看見一個事情嘅時候，咁我哋需要嘅就係要望得好清楚。
It's more than a split second.
要睇多過幾秒㗎。
So in the example of John, he looked at Jesus as he walked.
咁喺呢度約翰嘅例子裏邊，當時約翰就係睇住耶穌行走。
So his eyes were fixed on Jesus for a prolonged time.
當時相信佢嘅眼睛係定睛睇住耶穌一段嘅長嘅時間。
And then he said, "Behold."
跟住佢就話看哪。
He was sure after some time that this Jesus was the Lamb of God.
咁經過一段時候之後，約翰就好清楚呢位耶穌就係神嘅羔羊。
So when we refer back to 2 Samuel, the woman was very beautiful to behold.
咁如果我哋再講返撒母耳記下嗰度，當時係講到呢位婦人係容貌甚美。
So sometimes, our eyes may glance at something.
有時我哋嘅眼會好快咁樣睇一啲事情。
But for the woman to be described as beautiful to behold.
但係如果你話一個婦人看哪佢係非常之容貌甚美嘅話
，David, he must have looked and continued to look.
相信當時大衛係望完再望。
His eyes must have been fixed on her for a prolonged time.
相信佢嘅眼睛係望咗別是巴一段嘅長嘅時間。
He dwelled on the temptation.
佢亦都沉迷喺呢個嘅誘惑裏面。
He allowed the temptation to linger longer than necessary.
大衛容許佢呢個嘅試探延伸落去。
So when we allow temptation to linger,
當我哋容許呢啲嘅試探延伸落去嘅時候
to fester in the heart,
喺我哋嘅心裏邊發芽嘅時候
we allow our desires to develop.
咁我哋就會容許我哋嘅慾望去發展落去。
Yeah, so the book of James describes this as, allowing our desires to conceive.
咁雅各書亦都形容到係我哋容許我哋嘅慾望去懷胎。
Yeah, and then, when desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin.
咁當我哋嘅慾望懷胎嘅時候，就會生出罪來。
Yeah, and this is what exactly happened.
咁喺大衛嘅事蹟上就係咁樣發生呢件事。
We see that David acted upon his desires.
咁我哋所知嘅就係大衛就係因為佢嘅慾望，跟住佢有所行動。
He sent and inquired about this woman.
佢就揾人去打探有關呢個婦人嘅消息。
And then in verse 4, he took her and he laid with her.
咁喺第4節就講到，佢就將呢個婦人接下來，而同佢發生呢個關係。
His desire, eventually gave birth to sin.
咁佢嘅慾望到最後就生出呢個罪來。
So instead of dwelling on temptation,
所以我哋唔應該係沉迷喺呢個嘅試探裏面。
But we should be like Joseph.
我哋應該就反而係要學習約瑟。
He fled in the face of temptation.
當約瑟面臨引誘嘅時候，佢選擇躲避。
Yeah, Joseph's temptation was very near.
約瑟亦都經歷過一個好親近嘅試探。
It was a close encounter with Potiphar's wife.
佢當時同波提乏嘅太太亦都有個好緊密嘅相遇。
She spoke and tempted him daily.
呢個主母每一日都同約瑟對話，亦都去引誘佢。
And when nobody was in the house,
當冇人喺屋企嘅時候
she trapped Joseph.
佢就拉約瑟埋一邊。
And she grabbed him.
佢就捉住約瑟。
And he fled the scene.
咁之後約瑟就快快咁樣逃離。
And his garment was left in her hand.
佢甚至佢嘅衣服就留喺呢個主母嘅手上。
We can look at 2 Timothy.
我哋可以睇下提摩太後書。
2 Timothy chapter 2.
提摩太後書嘅第2章。
We can read verse 22.
第22節。
Flee also youthful lusts, but pursue righteousness, faith, love, peace with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart.
第2章第22節，你要逃避少年人的私欲，同那清心禱告主的人追求公義、信德、仁愛、和平。
So Paul, here reminds us to flee youthful lusts.
喺呢度，保羅提醒我哋要逃避少年人嘅私欲。
When we choose to dwell on temptation,
當我哋選擇喺試探上沉迷嘅時候，
then we let our guards down.
咁我哋就會放低我哋一切嘅防備。
So Satan, he will stir up that desire in our hearts.
撒旦必定係會喺我哋嘅心裏邊去攪動我哋呢個嘅私欲㗎。
If we don't remove our desire quickly,
如果我哋唔趕快咁樣除去我哋心裏邊嘅私欲嘅話，
if we let it fester in our hearts,
如果我哋容許呢啲私欲喺我哋嘅心裏邊發芽嘅話，
then we're just endangering ourselves.
咁我哋就會將自己陷喺一個危險嘅處境裏邊。
Yeah, we shouldn't think that we're strong enough to stand in the face of temptation.
我哋唔可以以為我哋有呢個能力係站立喺試探裏邊。
We're not taught to stand and fight temptation.
我哋冇被教導要面對一切嘅試探。
Yeah, we're taught to flee it.
我哋係反而被教導嘅係要逃避一切嘅試探。
So this is the last teaching.
呢個就係最後嘅教訓。
Keep our guard up by fleeing temptation.
我哋要防備試探，就係要逃離呢啲一切嘅試探。
Yeah, don't dwell on it like David did.
我哋就唔好好似大衛咁樣沉迷喺呢啲嘅試探裏面。
So in the end, David tries to cover up his sins.
咁喺最後，大衛因為佢想去遮掩佢一切嘅罪行。
We know that he sends for Uriah in the hope that he would go home.
我哋亦都知道佢曾經就想打發烏利亞返屋企。
And then when that doesn't work,
咁當呢個嘅計劃行唔通嘅時候，
he indirectly kills him.
咁佢就間接將烏利亞殺死。
So that he could take Bathsheba as his wife.
讓佢可以娶拔示巴為妻子。
So he did all this just to cover up the sin of adultery.
咁所以大衛所做嘅呢一切係為咗佢要遮掩佢自己奸淫嘅罪行。
And in doing so, he also committed the sin of murder.
佢嘅一切嘅行動亦都係為。
He also committed the sin of murder.
佢亦都犯下呢個殺人呢個罪名。
So we always say one thing leads to another.
我哋好常都會話一不離二。
And it was like he had tunnel vision.
就好似大衛有一個好狹窄嘅觀景咁樣。
He could only see the shame of what he did.
佢只能夠睇到嘅就係佢自己所做嘅羞恥。
And he was just set on covering it up.
佢一心就係想將佢呢啲羞恥嘅事情去埋沒。
But he forgot, that you can never ever hide anything from God.
但係佢所忘記就係佢唔能夠將事情佢唔能夠隱瞞一切嘅事情。
Yeah, you can never hide anything from God.
所以神佢係唔可以隱瞞從神身上隱瞞一切嘅事情㗎。
Yeah, so one temptation can lead us to take many wrong actions.
咁一個嘅引誘可以導致到好多唔同嘅行動。
So it's important that we keep our guard up against temptations.
所以我哋係一定要去防備呢一切嘅試探，呢個係好重要嘅。
It's not just temptations of the flesh.
唔單止係肉身上嘅引誘。
It's temptations of pride.
亦都係驕傲方面嘅引誘。
It could be emotional temptations.
或者係一啲情感上嘅引誘。
Being angry and wanting to fight back.
例如係嬲怒或者係想還擊。
So there's many different temptations that we face.
有好多唔同嘅引誘我哋要面對。
And at different ages we all face different things.
唔同嘅年紀、唔同嘅階層，我哋又會面對唔同嘅事情。
So we learn to remember that we have responsibilities.
我哋今晚學習過，我哋有唔同嘅責任。
If there is a time for us assigned to do something.
如果係有啲時候，我哋係被委派去做一啲事情嘅話
，then fulfill our duties.
我哋應該要將呢個嘅責任完成。
Remember that we need to fill our hearts with the love of God.
我哋亦都要謹記，要將我哋嘅心填滿神嘅愛。
So that we can be satisfied.
讓我哋能夠得到滿足。
And we don't give Satan any room to exploit in our hearts.
我哋唔好心裏邊唔好留一啲嘅空隙俾魔鬼去利用。
We also need to remember to lead a disciplined life.
我哋亦都要謹記，要過着一個有紀律嘅人生。
Continue with the basic but fundamental practices of our faith.
我哋要好好咁樣守住信仰上最基本嘅事情，但係呢啲基本嘅事情亦都係最重要嘅事情。
Things like praying.
例如係禱告。
And then lastly, we have to remember to flee from temptation.
最後嘅教訓就係我哋要逃離呢啲一切嘅引誘。
Don't think that we're strong enough to stand and fight it.
唔好以為我哋係有能力堅強係可以對抗呢啲嘅引誘。
So thank God, this ends our mutual encouragement.
感謝神，我哋今晚彼此分享就到呢度為止。
So we can end and sing hymn 177.
我哋可以唱讚美詩177首結束。